Hi everyone and welcome to this history revision video focusing on Edward VI's religious changes. So firstly, in 1547, Edward passed an act for the dissolution of the Chantrys. Chantries were places where you could go and you would pay the church for prayers after you died so that they would pray for you while your soul was in purgatory so that you could get to heaven. Basically, it was a big extortionate scheme where you would pay the church tons of money for them to pray for you. So he had 3,000 chantries dissolved. This was a big move towards Protestantism, as prayers for the dead are usually a Catholic thing. Also in 1547, the Treason Act passed by Henry VIII was repealed. Originally, this act said that you could be executed for denying royal supremacy, but the repealing of this act allowed freedom of religious discussion, so people could talk freely about Catholicism and Protestantism. However, this led to a lot of riots and general disorder as people started radically preaching and everyone just got a bit tense. Then, the most important act of Edward's reign was the Act of Uniformity of 1549. This enforced the first Book of Common Prayer as the book to be used in all services across England, and the first Book of Common Prayer was written in English rather than Latin. This was a really big deal, as up until that point, only people who could read Latin could do Mass and actually pray, so this was a way of excluding lower classes from being involved in religion. They also started using the Book of Homilies, which also enforced having services in English. Clergy were allowed to marry, and laity, so common people, were allowed to receive communion. The Act also demanded that images and statues and fancy decorations would all be removed from churches. So this was a really big Protestant act, and it actually provoked the Western Rebellion of 1549. After Somerset's fall from power in 1549, Northumberland took over and pushed even further with religious reform. With the support of Thomas Cranmer, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Northumberland was able to push even more Protestant change. He made a new way of confirming Protestant priests, the new Ordinal, in 1550, made the second Book of Common Prayer in 1552, which completely removed all Catholic practices, as the first Book of Common Prayer still included some Catholic stuff like transubstantiation. He also passed the 1552 Second Act of Uniformity to enforce the new Book of Common Prayer, and he made church attendance compulsory so that everybody in England had to be pushed into Protestantism. Now the extent of change by 1553. In terms of England being more Protestant, England was officially a Protestant country. Protestantism was a lot stronger in London, southeast of England and East Anglia, and it was accepted mostly. There was a general feeling of obedience, and it was most popular with the younger and more educated people, particularly traders, so Protestantism did have strong roots in that respect. However, there's a strong argument that underneath all of that, England was still Catholic. Edward was only king for 6 years, and that wasn't enough time to make long-lasting change, so all of his Protestant reforms were quite artificial. Many churches hid images rather than destroy them, and were waiting to bring them back out once Edward was no longer king. Also, people had to be forced into these Protestant practices. Priests had to be urged against transubstantiation, so it shows that Catholic beliefs were still popular, and it was only because of legislation that people followed it. Also, the church was still very corrupt, so Edward's religious reform didn't actually solve the real problems with the church. Catholicism was a lot more popular with older and less educated people, particularly in the north and west of England. And despite given the chance, only 20% of the clergy actually got married, so this all shows that England said they were Protestant in name, but in reality it was still quite a Catholic country.